The Mig-23ML is a Soviet premium jet in War Thunder. Is it worth it? Let's find out. The MiG-23 was the primary Soviet interceptor of the 1970s, and it first flew in 1967, before entering service in 1970. I've gone over its more general history in other reviews, and here we're specifically looking at the ML version. The Mig-23ML was introduced to try and address some of the problems that came up from operational experience with first-generation MiG-23 variants. It featured a laundry list of changes and improvements to almost every aspect of the plane. It had minor aerodynamic changes, structural reinforcements, significant electronics upgrades, changes to the fuel system, and even the landing gear was modified. It also featured a new engine that gave the ML better fuel efficiency and a better thrust-to-weight ratio than previous models, as well as an easier maintenance cycle. The end result of all these upgrades was significant, with the flight performance of the ML being about half a generation of a leap over the original versions of the jet. It turned better, it was faster, it climbed better, and it flew farther. The MiG-23ML first flew in 1975, and over 1,000 were produced, in addition to the ML being the starting point for all future versions of the basic MiG-23 design. The Soviet Union was the primary user for the ML and retired them all in the 1990s, but a small number of planes are still flying today with export customers. Of special note to mention is that there are wildly conflicting reports about the combat record of the MiG-23ML, some of which I'm personally pretty skeptical of, but suffice to say there's significant disagreement about the MiG-23ML's service record in actual combat. What we get in War Thunder is the MiG-23ML, a premium jet fighter in rank 7 of the Soviet air tree with a battle rating of 11.3. This jet carries the Sapphire 23ML radar set, which features a lookup search mode, MTI mode, and an analog look-down mode. If you need more info about how these radar modes work, I'll drop a link in a pinned comment to my complete guide on aircraft radar. Notably, the radar set doesn't get multiple dish sweep angles or range presets for the scope, but it does have an ACM bore sight mode and an infrared search and track unit. The plane also gets a CCIP ballistics computer for its cannons and rocket pods, but not for the bombs, and it also doesn't get an EEGS for dogfighting. In terms of loadouts, the ML actually gets a surprisingly flexible loadout system, with 4 pylons for rockets, bombs, gun pods, or missiles. Plus, it's got a centerline pylon that can take a drop tank or extra countermeasures. For air-to-air missiles, you have 2 choices for short-range weapons, the R-60M or the R-13M1. The R-13 has a longer range and it tracks a little bit better, but it's rear aspect only and it doesn't slave to a radar lock. The R-60M has much shorter range, loves to chase flares, but it pulls significantly harder and you can take more of them. For medium-range weapons, you can take both infrared and semi-active radar versions of the R-23 and R-24 missiles. The R-24 is an upgrade in every way over the 23, with pretty medium overall performance in the current meta. The question of taking the T versus the R really honestly just comes down to personal preference. The ML can also take the KH-23M, a manual command line-of-sight guided anti-tank missile. I'm personally horrible with these things, but they can usually take out a tank on a direct hit if you can manage to get one. The flight performance of the MiG-23ML can really be broken down into 2 parts: engine power and agility. Its engine power is just excellent, with very fast acceleration, a strong rate of climb, and a high maximum speed at altitude. Its agility, however, is more of a tricky topic. The ML performs pretty well in vertical maneuvers, mainly due to its engine power, but in flat horizontal turns or scissor maneuvers, it tends to lag a bit behind most other fighters at the top tier. The plane is going to feel like it has a pretty low wing rip speed, but really, that's just because the engine is so strong, and you're going to get up to the wing rip speed very quickly, even at low altitudes. It maxes out at about 1,450 kilometers an hour with full wing sweep, so keep an eye on the airspeed. Now, speaking of the wings, by default, the controls are going to be set to an automatic wing sweep mode that keeps the wings set for the best speed performance rather than for agility. I don't always do it myself, but if you need a little extra turn performance, you can set your sweep control to manual and throw the wings forward. Just be aware that the rip speed comes down to under 900 kilometers an hour if you do. The optimal flight range for dogfighting agility is to have the wings fully unswept and to keep your speed in between about 700 and 800 kilometers an hour if possible. Now, also noteworthy, the plane doesn't have any combat flaps, and it uses spoilers for rolling. The roll rate is noticeably worse than most other top-tier jets when you have the wings unswept, and you're going to want to be thinking about a full second ahead. If you need to slow down, the ML has a very effective set of air brakes on the tail, which, combined with the manual wing sweep, can sometimes help you force a more maneuverable target to overshoot you in a close-up turn fight, so that's something to remember. And as long as you make sure that you take the drop tanks out on the larger EC maps, you're probably not going to have any fuel problems. Flying the Mig-23ML into air battles is almost always going to mean getting sucked up into BR-12 matches as of mid-2023. Given the limitations of the ML in terms of dogfighting, you're going to have a very difficult time if you get into close quarters fights with stuff like F-16s and MiG-29s. In the vast majority of situations, the R-60M is going to end up being your preferred weapon if you're in a close-range dogfight, like under 2 or 3 kilometers, but just remember, it really loves the chase flares, as demonstrated in a few of the clips I included in this review, so you're going to need to learn some trigger discipline with your shots. Also remember that switching to the IRST can be pretty helpful, as it won't set off your opponent's radar warning receiver, which might help you get the jump on someone who doesn't know you're there, like if you're covering a wingman or if you're jumping out from behind a mountain or something. Where the Mig-23ML really excels, though, is in fast flyby interception tactics. If you can zoom in on someone with the R-24s, they tend to do reasonably well in head-on engagements, especially the R-24T, which can't be notched, and it's somewhat resistant to flares. Now, I'm going to take the opportunity here for another shameless plug for my complete guides to radar and air-to-air missiles, where I go over the MTI and LD radar modes in more detail and show you how to correctly use all these missiles. If you're new to top tier, you should absolutely give those a watch. Links in a pinned comment. Now, in terms of ground attack, the ML can destroy a base with a full load of bombs, just barely, but it only gets a CCIP for rockets and guns. Its only guided missile is manually guided, which is incredibly difficult at the top tier, so the rocket pods would probably be your primary choice for close air support. And of course, that means getting in really close, where you're vulnerable to player-controlled SPAA, and I generally don't suggest this as an effective close air support jet. Visually, I've always liked the look of the MiG-23. With the ML, the default skin only has one roundel, like up on the tail, so if you like to customize like I do, this is a really easy jet to decorate. Landing this plane is something you'll want to practice, especially if you're new to the top tiers. You'll want to manually unsweep the wings and put out the landing flaps, which you can do at around 450 kilometers an hour, and you can safely drop your gear anywhere up to around 600. The jet has a drag chute, and overall, I'd rate its landing performance as excellent after you practice a couple of times in a test flight. Now, the cockpit is standard MiG-23 stuff, and it's somewhat of an acquired taste. It has poor rearward visibility, no functioning radar warning receiver in the cockpit, and the canopy bracing can get in the way quite a bit. But the instruments are mostly clear, and it gets a useful heads-up display. Notably, the radar scope is superimposed over the HUD, which might be weird for some people, but I actually kind of like it. To close out on the Mig-23ML. This jet is very fast. It has an IRST system. Its R-24 missile still does okay in the current meta as of mid-2023, and it gets premium bonuses. However, it's only average in a close-up dogfight. It runs out of cannon ammo really quick, and it doesn't have the EEGS. It has very limited potential for close air support. Its radar is comparably short range, and it's very expensive. The final verdict on the premium Mig-23ML is that this isn't the best version of the Mig-23, but it's not the worst either, and I'd say it's a pretty okay plane overall. If this is your first top-tier premium and you can manage to get good with it, those skills will transfer over into other top-tier jets pretty well. Just remember, this thing is very expensive. As always, thanks for watching.